A Boston police officer lies dead in the snow, his body battered and frozen. His girlfriend is charged with running him down in a drunken rage. But what if she never touched him? What if the real killers are sitting inside that house, wearing badges, orchestrating the most brazen cover-up in Massachusetts history? This is the Karen Reed case, and nothing is what it seems. Welcome to Court Decoded. Today we break down a case that has divided a nation: murder or frame-up, justice or conspiracy, the trial of Karen Reed. January 29th, 2022. A brutal nor'easter tears through Canton, Massachusetts, dropping nearly 2 feet of snow. Boston police officer John O'Keefe, 46 years old, a 16-year veteran of the force, attends a house party at the home of fellow officer Brian Albert. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, a financial analyst, drops him off sometime after midnight. By morning, John O'Keefe would be dead, his body discovered on the front lawn, partially buried in snow, showing signs of hypothermia and mysterious injuries. The temperature had plunged to single digits, his skull was fractured, his arm was covered in strange lacerations, and his girlfriend, the last known person to see him alive, immediately became the prime suspect. Within weeks, Karen Reed would be arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The prosecution's theory was simple. She struck him with her Lexus SUV in a drunken rage, left him to die, and drove away. But this simple narrative would soon unravel into something far more complex. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts built its case on seemingly straightforward evidence. Karen Reed and John O'Keefe had been drinking that night at multiple locations. Witnesses described their relationship as volatile. Prosecutors pointed to a broken taillight on Reed's Lexus SUV, fragments allegedly matching pieces found near O'Keefe's body in the snow. The medical examiner concluded that O'Keefe died from hypothermia and blunt force trauma consistent with being struck by a vehicle. Cell phone data placed Reed at the scene. And perhaps most damning, prosecutors claimed Reed made incriminating statements to first responders, allegedly saying, quote, "I hit him," end quote, while at the scene. The narrative seemed airtight: a heated argument, an impulsive act of violence, and a cowardly retreat into the night, while a man froze to death mere feet from safety. But defense attorneys saw something entirely different in this evidence. Not proof of guilt, but the architecture of a frame job. Defense attorney Alan Jackson presented a counter-narrative that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. According to the defense, John O'Keefe never died outside that house. He died inside it. The theory alleged that O'Keefe was beaten to death at the party, possibly after a confrontation, and his body was then staged on the lawn to make it appear as a hit-and-run. The homeowner, Brian Albert, was a fellow Boston police officer. Other law enforcement members were present that night. The defense argued this wasn't just a murder, it was a conspiracy involving cops covering for cops, with Karen Reed as the convenient scapegoat. Jackson highlighted suspicious behavior. Brian Albert's dog was mysteriously rehomed shortly after the incident. The house was never searched with a warrant, and witnesses who were present that night gave inconsistent statements. The defense painted a picture of institutional corruption, where the thin blue line didn't just protect officers, it framed an innocent woman for murder. The forensic evidence became the battlefield where reasonable doubt was won or lost. Defense experts challenged nearly every piece of physical evidence the prosecution presented. The taillight fragments? Expert witnesses testified they could have been planted or tracked to the scene on emergency responders' boots. The injuries on O'Keefe's body? Defense experts argued the lacerations on his arm were consistent with dog bites, not vehicle impact, raising questions about Brian Albert's German Shepherd. The skull fracture? Medical experts retained by the defense suggested the wound pattern was more consistent with a beating than a vehicular strike. Perhaps most critically, accident reconstruction specialists testified that the damage to Reed's SUV was inconsistent with striking a full-grown man. The physics, they argued, simply did not add up. Prosecutors countered with their own experts, but the seed of doubt had been planted. In a criminal trial, that seed can grow into acquittal. As the state trial progressed, a parallel investigation was quietly unfolding. Federal authorities began examining allegations of witness tampering, evidence manipulation, and obstruction of justice, not against Karen Reed, but against those investigating her. The defense revealed that the FBI had been looking into potential misconduct by Massachusetts law enforcement connected to the case. Witnesses testified about pressure to change statements. Questions emerged about the chain of custody for critical evidence. The lead investigator's credibility came under intense scrutiny. This federal involvement transformed the trial from a simple murder case into something unprecedented, a courtroom where the defendant argued she was being framed by the very institutions designed to seek justice. The prosecution dismissed these allegations as conspiracy theories designed to distract from the evidence. But for many watching the trial, the federal investigation validated what the defense had been arguing all along. Something was deeply wrong with this case. After weeks of testimony, hundreds of exhibits, and arguments that gripped the nation, the jury retired to deliberate. Days passed. Then a note emerged that would change everything. The jury reported it was hopelessly deadlocked. Despite extensive deliberations, the 12 citizens could not reach a unanimous verdict on any of the charges. Judge Beverly Canton declared a mistrial in July 2024, leaving Karen Read neither convicted nor exonerated. The courtroom erupted. Supporters of Reed celebrated what they saw as a vindication of reasonable doubt. Prosecutors expressed disappointment but vowed to retry the case. The O'Keefe family was left without closure, justice for their loved ones still unresolved. Outside the courthouse, the divide was physical, pro-Reed demonstrators clashing with those who believed in her guilt. This case had become more than a trial. It had become a referendum on trust in law enforcement itself. The Karen Reed case will be studied in law schools for decades as a masterclass in reasonable doubt. The prosecution presented physical evidence, witness testimony, and a coherent theory of the crime. Yet the defense systematically dismantled confidence in each element, not by proving innocence, but by demonstrating that alternative explanations were plausible. This is the essence of criminal defense. The burden never shifts from the prosecution. A defendant does not need to prove they did not commit a crime. They need only show that the evidence leaves room for reasonable uncertainty. In Reed's case, the defense created multiple points of doubt: the forensic inconsistencies, the federal investigation, the questions about police conduct, the alternative theory of what happened inside that house. Individually, each might be dismissed. Collectively, they formed an impenetrable wall of uncertainty that at least some jurors could not see past. Karen Reed's legal journey is far from over. Prosecutors have announced their intention to retry the case, meaning she will face another jury, another presentation of evidence, another fight for her freedom. The stakes remain identical. Conviction could mean life in prison. Meanwhile, the federal investigation continues its work, examining whether the very foundations of this prosecution were corrupted from the start. Witnesses may face their own legal jeopardy. Reputations hang in the balance. The Canton Police Department, the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office, and indeed the entire Massachusetts law enforcement community watches as their credibility is weighed and measured. For John O'Keefe's family, there is no victory to be found anywhere in this saga, only the anguish of a loved one lost and the torment of justice perpetually delayed. Whatever the truth of that January night, one thing is certain: someone got away with something terrible. The Karen Reed case ended in mistrial, a legal outcome that satisfies no one but teaches everyone. This case demonstrates that forensic evidence is not infallible. Expert witnesses can contradict each other. Institutions meant to uphold justice can become suspects themselves. And ultimately, our legal system is designed to err on the side of the accused. When evidence can be interpreted multiple ways, when investigations are tainted by even the appearance of impropriety, when reasonable people can reasonably disagree, that is when reasonable doubt prevails. Whether Karen Reed is guilty or innocent remains unresolved, but the principle at stake is crystal clear. In America, we do not convict on probability. We convict on certainty, and certainty in this case was nowhere to be found. If this case fascinated and challenged what you think you know about justice, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to understand how reasonable doubt actually works in the American legal system.